Last week, I asked you to do one thing. When communication breaks between two people who think differently, look at the channel before you look at the person. And I have been thinking about that ask all week because it is incomplete and I want to fix it today. Here's what is wrong with it. Say you took me seriously. Say you sat in a meeting this week and something went sideways. And instead of doing the usual thing, you stopped and you looked at the channel. Good. Now, what did you see? Because if you are like most leaders who try this, you saw something go wrong and you had no words for it. You could feel that the exchange failed. You could not say where, and a failure you cannot name does not stay unnamed for long. It gets a name from whatever category your organization already has lying around, and I am going to tell you exactly which category that is in a few minutes, because it is the whole problem. So today is the vocabulary episode. 6 names. That is the deliverable. By the end of this, you should be able to take a breakdown that keeps happening in your organization, one that keeps coming back, and say which of the 6 it is. Not fix it, name it. The fixing comes over the next 3 episodes, and I will tell you at the end exactly how those are laid out, because that structure surprised me a little when I mapped it. Before the 6, I need to give you the frame they sit in. And this is where the work actually comes from. If you have been following my frameworks on the site, you know the communication work starts with Edgar Schein. Schein was the MIT organizational psychologist who gave us the model of culture almost every organization now uses without knowing whose it is. His idea is that culture runs at 3 levels. There are artifacts, which is everything you can actually observe, your meeting formats, your review, your org chart, how people talk to each other in the hallway. There are espoused values, which is what the organization says it believes and puts on the wall. And underneath both of those are the tacit assumptions, which is what the organization actually operates on, mostly without anyone saying it out loud, often without anyone knowing it's even there. And culture, in Schein's model, is measured by alignment between those 3. When your artifacts and your espoused values and your tacit assumptions all say the same thing, you have a coherent culture. When they drift apart, you have whatever it is you actually have. So take that and point it at communication. Your espoused value is almost certainly something like, we want the best thinking to reach the decision. Nobody argues with that. Say it in any leadership meeting and everybody nods. Now go find the tacit assumption underneath it. The tacit assumption is that good thinking arrives sounding a certain way. Fluent, confident, fast. In the room, in the moment, in the format the room already runs. Those 2 are not the same thing. And the distance between them is the whole subject of this episode. A change to your communication architecture means pulling that tacit assumption back into line with the value you actually espouse. And to do that, you have to be able to see the assumption. That is what the 6 dimensions are for. They are the 6 places where the assumption is running, doing damage, and getting recorded as something else. Which brings me to where the breakdowns get recorded. Because this is the part that made me want to do this episode. Think about where a communication breakdown actually gets written down in your organization. Not talked about, written down. There's basically one place, and it's on an employee file, a performance review most likely. And in that review, it lives as a soft skill, which is a category that carries an assumption inside it, that the outcome depends on the individual's own effort. So it becomes a development area. The development area becomes a coaching engagement or a workshop. And then it comes back next cycle, sometimes in gentler words, and the cycle repeats. Now, anyone who has been a leader has written one of these reviews. And most of us have also read one about ourselves. And I want to be fair, because that feedback is important. Because leadership is influence, and influence runs on language. Communication feedback is meaningful. It is important for being effective. I am not here to tell you to stop giving it. I argued last week that the failure is not purely the individual's effort. It happens at the interface, in the space between how one person thinks and how the room listens. And here's the thing I could not stop turning over this week. Even if you completely accept that argument, You still walk into your next review cycle with nothing new to write down. The premise changed. The form did not. So what actually happens in that room? Nobody present can name what really failed. And when nobody can name it, the proxy category gets signed automatically. That is the phrase I want you to keep from this episode, the proxy category. And in almost every organization I have seen, the proxy category is an individual development opportunity. Because it is the one category that has a name, a budget line, and a form attached to it. And then 3 things happen at once. And none of them is recorded accurately for what really happened. The coaching budget you allocated gets spent as development. The risk analysis that was critical never reaches the decision-making meeting. And the decision that the accountable leader needed to own and make does not get made. Sit with that third one. Not made badly, not made late. The judgment that was the leader's to make and own simply does not happen because what it needed never showed up. Okay, so the 6 dimensions then. Here is how I'm going to do each one, so you know what is coming. A scene you have probably sat in. Then, what the dimension is called and what it actually means. Then, the sentence it gets recorded as instead, because that is the tell, and that is the part you can go looking for on Monday. Then, one question to ask about your own meetings. Number 1 is inference. You are in a steering meeting and you ask a director whether the timeline holds. She answers the question you ask. The build is on track. Integration testing is the open risk. Here is the date to watch. And what you hear is hedging. By the following week, the story about that meeting is that she would not commit. And by mid-year, it shows up in her review as a note about executive presence. Go back through that exchange slowly. What she transmitted was a delivery status and a named integration risk. What you received was a mood. The words were accurate when she said them and audible when you heard them. So the loss did not happen in the air between you. It happened in the layer where the two of you assemble meaning out of what was said. I named this dimension inference. It is the mismatch between what was communicated and what was inferred. Some people state what they mean and mean what they state. Other people state part of it and expect you to assemble the rest out of context and tone and shared history. Because in their experience, that is simply how competent adults talk to each other. Put those two on the opposite ends of one exchange with nothing designed in between, and the literal answer keeps getting read for subtext that is not in it. And the implicit one keeps getting taken more literally than it was ever built to be. If you have ever asked somebody for a quick gut check and gotten 20 careful minutes, you were standing right here. The word quick was itself implicit, and it landed on somebody who processes literally. The sentence it gets recorded as, she would not commit. What actually happened is that room supplied a meaning the sender never sent. Your question, where in your meetings does meaning get filled in rather than stated? Number 2 is timing. You go around the table at your Tuesday leadership meeting. 3 people answer on the spot. A 4th says something non-committal. And you close the decision on the 3 answers that were available in the room. Here's what you didn't know. That 4th person had the most complete answer of anyone at the table and needed until the next morning to assemble it. Because assembling is how that person produces answers. Your meeting format closed the question before the answer existed. So you never got to weigh it against the 3 you did here. The dimension is timing. Cognitive systems process and respond at different speeds. In any environment that rewards immediate response, systematically disadvantages deliberate processors. Now, anyone who runs a standing leadership meeting has closed a question exactly this way, myself included. And I want to be honest about why it is so hard to catch. From inside that room, nothing failed. The discussion was good, and you made a decision. The minutes say a decision was made. Everyone moved on to the next item. The loss only shows up later, if it shows up at all, as a decision that would have gone the other way. And nothing anywhere in your organization records the answer that was still being assembled when you close the question. Your minutes have no line for it, neither does anything else you keep. The sentence it gets recorded as, it does not contribute in meetings. What actually happened is that your format set a response deadline that person's processing does not meet. Your question: what does your meeting format do with an answer that needs a day? In most formats, the honest answer is nothing. There is no slot for, I will have the real answer tomorrow. Number 3 is signal clarity. You send 2 lines on a Tuesday. Revisit those Q3 numbers before Thursday. To you, that is completely unambiguous because you know which numbers, you know which concern is driving it, and you know how far the word revisit goes. The 3 people who receive it spend part of their afternoon working out what you meant. Is this a sanity check? Or is the plan in question? Does before Thursday mean send a reply or rebuild the model? So they compare notes with each other. They prepare for the heavier version to be safe. And the cost of the specificity you left out gets paid by 3 people who are not in a position to supply it. And seniority makes this worse rather than better, which is the counterintuitive part. The more senior you are, the more certain you tend to be that what was obvious to you traveled along with the message. Anyone who has led at any level has sent that message. My protocol defines signal clarity as the difference between what was meant, what was said, and what was heard. 3 versions of your message exist in every single exchange. The one in your head, the one that actually left, and the one that landed. With nothing designed at this point, your organization just proceeds as though all 3 were the same message. The sentence it gets recorded as, they cannot take direction, or they need too much handholding. What actually happened is that you shipped a message with the specificity removed and no design to recover it. So your question: where does your organization assume clarity instead of building it? Look for the messages that reliably generate a round of clarifying questions. Number 4 is sensory load. And this is the one I expect you to set aside first. Picture your quarterly all associates. Bright hall, hard echo, screens on 2 walls. A deck moving faster than anybody can actually read it. Side conversations running at the edges. You put important content into that room, and only part of it reaches the people you call there. And the reason this one gets waved off is that it does not look like communication at all. It looks like a facilities decision. The dimension is sensory load. Environmental factors consume cognitive bandwidth before communication even begins. And high sensory load environments reduce fidelity for everyone in the room, selectively for some. The mechanism is not complicated. Attention your people spend managing the room, filtering the noise, keeping up with the pace, is attention that never reaches your content. What is not obvious is how unevenly it lands. Some nervous systems register far more of the environment than others. So the same hour costs one person a small overhead and costs the person sitting right next to them most of the capacity they had walked in with. Both of them attended. Only one had enough left to follow you. The sentence it gets recorded as disengaged, because the difference in what each of them took away looks exactly like a difference in how much they cared. What actually happened is that nobody in your organization counted what the room itself consumed. Your question: what is the room costing you before anyone speaks? Number 5 is emotional attribution. And I want to spend a little longer here because it is the one that gets narrowed the fastest. A manager gives you a project update in a level, even register. Facts laid out. Voice never rises. Done in 4 minutes. And you come away with an impression that this person is low energy, maybe checked out. The update itself was careful, complete, quietly proud work. But what travels out of that room is your impression, into the talent review and onto the succession slate. The work you are actually told about does not travel with it. Now, that is one direction, and is the direction leaders name most easily. This dimension runs in every direction. An engineer answers a challenge directly, without softening the disagreement. And what gets written down is that he was angry, or that he came at people, and it shows up in the 360 as abrasive. Somebody delivers a plan at pace and emphatically, and the note afterwards is that the delivery was emotional, or that they are not ready for the executive team. Somebody runs warm and enthusiastic in a room that treats warmth as a sign of not being serious, and the read is that the work lacks rigor. In every one of those, including the flat one, the room did not evaluate what was said. The room assigned a state of mind to a delivery, and then evaluated the state of mind. The dimension is emotional attribution, the automatic assignment of emotional meaning to communication style. And notice that the definition names no particular emotion. That is deliberate. Any state your room is capable of reading into a delivery belongs here. Energy, anger, defensiveness, enthusiasm, confidence, composure under pressure. How invested somebody is in the work. Because every room carries a default for all of those and what they're supposed to sound like. And the people whose natural register happens to match that default gets their actual state understood correctly at no cost, with nobody in the room noticing that any interpreting was required. Everybody else gets interpreted every time they speak, and what you interpreted gets written down afterwards as an observation about them. Nobody ever writes that tone read through my default suggested disengagement. They write seems disengaged, and the next person to open that file reads it as fact. I should declare my interest here. My own register is flat. For years, the content of what I was saying rarely got checked against the emotion or room that already assigned to it. The sentence it gets recorded as, any state of mind your room has a default for. What actually happened is that somebody read a register against their own default and recorded the reading as an observation about a person. Your question, whose tone gets interpreted and whose gets taken at face value? Number 6 is execution visibility. And this one fails after everybody has stopped watching. Your meeting ends well. The path feels clear. 2 weeks later, 2 teams have built 2 different things, and each team is completely faithful to what its own people understood you had decided. 2 people left your room with 2 different decisions in their notes, and nothing in between that meeting and the build made the difference visible to you. The dimension is execution visibility, the gap between what was decided and what was understood to have been decided. What makes this one expensive is where it sits on the line. The other 5 failed during the exchange, while somebody in the room might still catch it. This one fails on the way out the door, in the space between we decided and here is what we decided, who owns it, and by when. A decision that leaves your room as a shared feeling of agreement actually leaves as 4 or 5 private versions of a decision, one in each person's notes. And you do not find out how far apart those versions are until the build makes them concrete, which is the most expensive place in your whole organization to discover a disagreement that was sitting at your table the entire time. The sentence it gets recorded as, poor execution, or that team does not follow through. What actually happened is that the decision left your room without an artifact, so each person carried out their version they had assembled. So your question, how does a decision leave your room? If the answer is that everyone just knows, this is your dimension. That is the 6. Let me give you the operating brief, which is the part to actually take with you along with the 6 dimensions. The moment is this. Your review cycle is open, and you're about to commission a coaching engagement, and a communication failure with a person's name attached to it is about to get written up again. The vibe-led default is that you treat the breakdown as the person, and the cost of that is specific. The budget you allocated gets spent on development. The analysis that never arrived is not recorded as a loss anywhere at all, and the breakdown itself survives the coaching completely intact because you aimed the treatment at a place the failure never lived in. The redesign is that before anyone gets coached, you run the breakdown against the 6. Which one is it failing at? Inference, timing, signal clarity, sensory load, emotional attribution, execution visibility. Name the dimension and name the meeting it fails in. Locating it is the entire task this week. The repair comes later. And the Monday test. Pick one recurring breakdown that you have been attributing to a person and locate it on the 6th before your next conversation about that person. Saying this is a timing failure in that Tuesday leadership meeting out loud to yourself or to the room is the whole move. Now, let me tell you what is coming, because the structure here is worth knowing in advance. Against those 6 dimensions, my protocol sets 9 structural interventions, and they come in 3 groups: interpretation interventions, process interventions, and environmental interventions. The next 3 episodes take 1 group each. And here is the part I want to be precise about, because it changes how you use today's audit. Those 9 interventions do not sort neatly one-to-one onto the 6 dimensions. Each intervention addresses 3 dimensions at once, and every single dimension is addressed by interventions sitting in more than 1 group. All of this is available on my website, and you can click through these frameworks so you can actually see how the dimensions actually interact with the interventions. Inference, for example, is addressed by 6 of the 9, spread across all 3 groups. Sense reload is addressed by 3 in 2 of them. So naming the dimension tells you which interventions to reach for. It does not hand you 1 group and send you on your way. The repair layer is more connected than the diagnostic layer. And I think that is the honest shape of the problem rather than a flaw in the model. Before I let you go, back to Schein for 1 second, because this is what the 6 are really for. The 6 dimensions are the places where your tacit assumptions about communication sit furthest from the values you espouse about it. Naming which one is failing is the thing that makes those 2 available to align. That is what an audit is, not a judgment, an inventory. So here's your homework, and it is small. This week, walk your own meetings and locate 1 breakdown on the 6. 1. Pick a breakdown that has already occurred, ideally one with a person's name attached to it, and instead of talking about the person, name the dimension and name the meeting it fails in. You have the names now. That is the audit. And for this week, that is enough. If any of this landed, the essay version is on the site at theautisticleader.ai, and the subscribe link is in the description to my Substack. Next week, we start repairing.